Let's dive right into a psychological mystery that literally affects countless adults. I'm talking about that sudden, totally baffling mood shift that hits you the absolute second you walk through your parents' front door. You could be a high-powered CEO or successfully raising 3 kids of your own, but the very moment you cross that threshold and smell mom's pot roast, bam, you suddenly feel like an angsty 14-year-old again. Well, in today's Explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why this happens and, more importantly, how you can actually reclaim your adult self. It's a question that has genuinely baffled families for generations, right? I mean, why does a perfectly independent adult, someone who confidently manages a whole career and complex relationships, just instantly transform into an angry, quiet teenager the moment they are around their mother? You've probably noticed this in your partner, or let's be real, you might even do it yourself. On the surface, it just looks like someone being moody or difficult. But as we'll see, there's actually a profound psychological tug-of-war happening just beneath the surface. And this stark contrast brilliantly illustrates the whole paradox we're investigating today. It's like night and day. Away from home, this person is calm, loving, they're making their own independent choices. But at their parents' house, suddenly they're sullen, quiet, and honestly just incredibly easy to irritate. It's a really jarring clash between the capable adult self you've worked so hard to build and this hyper-vigilant child self that just got forcefully reawakened.
Section 1. The diagnosis. It's not hate, it's enmeshment. Let's get into it.
If you just look at a bad mood like this on the surface, you might think, oh, they just don't get along. But actually, scratch that. This irritability is a very real physical and emotional reaction to an overwhelming, deeply rooted attachment. To wrap our heads around this, let's look at a really powerful Japanese concept called oyabanare, which translates roughly to leaving the nest. But here's the kicker. It is not about physical distance, and it definitely doesn't mean loving your parents any less. True separation means untangling your own emotional center from your mother's expectations. Basically, if your internal compass is still spinning based on whether your mom is happy or disappointed, you haven't fully left the nest emotionally, period, no matter how far away you actually live.
So the really crucial point here is that tiny, everyday sensory triggers in that physical environment can instantly strip away your adult identity. It's not usually some massive blowout argument that sets it off. It can be something as subtle as your mother using that super familiar clean your room tone of voice. Or maybe it's an unsolicited comment about your haircut. It could literally just be sitting at the old dining table while someone else suddenly dictates the daily schedule and tells you exactly what you're going to eat. These seemingly minor everyday triggers force you right back into a really restrictive child role.
And that brings us to the core of the diagnosis. The irritability you're seeing on the surface, it's actually a powerful defense mechanism. It's masking the profound shame and, honestly, the frustration of feeling like your adult autonomy has just been completely erased. You want to be treated like an adult, obviously, but you feel utterly powerless to demand it without causing some massive family rift. So instead of speaking up, you shut down. You get moody because at that moment, it's the only armor you have left to protect your hard-earned adult dignity. Moving right along to Section 2, the emotional triangle, mother versus romantic partner. Now, if just managing the childhood home wasn't stressful enough on its own, bringing an adult romantic relationship into that physical space creates an absolute powder keg of conflicting loyalties. If we map this out, we can see the man is caught in a totally impossible emotional triangle. Notice how every single action has a negative internal consequence. If he treats his partner well in front of his mother, he gets hit with overwhelming guilt, like he's somehow abandoning or betraying his mom. But if he tries to please his mother by falling back into that classic good son routine, he experiences deep frustration and feels like he's losing his dignity. It is a completely no-win situation. There's a quote from our source material that perfectly captures this conflict. Love for a mother and love for a partner cannot be placed in the same spot. And it's so true. Romantic love actually requires shifting your family's center of gravity. It means building a totally new foundation with your partner. But for someone who has literally always anchored their entire sense of worth to their mother's happiness, this totally necessary shift triggers massive, overwhelming anxiety. And this leads to one of the absolute most confusing behaviors for a partner to deal with. Because of this deep-seated anxiety and this agonizing feeling of being torn in half, the man might inexplicably act super cold toward his completely innocent partner when they're at the childhood home. Subconsciously, he's just trying to balance the emotional scales. By distancing himself from his partner, he's basically non-verbally signaling to his mom, hey, don't worry, you're still the center of my world.
It is incredibly unfair to the partner, for sure, but it stems entirely from that misplaced guilt. Which brings us to Section 3, the backstory. The burden of the good child. Let's look at where this comes from. To truly understand why this dynamic is so powerful and so ridiculously difficult to break, we've got to look back at the childhood origins. People don't just develop this level of enmeshment by accident, right? It's usually a survival mechanism that they learned very early on. If a child grew up in a tense home, maybe the parents didn't speak much, or there was just a lot of unspoken anger floating around, that kid often took on the role of peacemaker. In adolescence, they became absolute experts at reading the room and managing their parents' emotions just to keep the house stable. And now in adulthood, that deeply ingrained peacemaker habit just persists. Their brain is still literally wired to prioritize the mother's feelings above absolutely everything else. This quote really hits the nail on the head. If someone is hurt, I have to fix it. Carrying this heavy internal burden into adulthood means that even a tiny hint of disappointment from the mother, a sigh, a specific look, a subtle passive-aggressive comment, triggers an immediate panicky need to fix things. And they will try to fix it even at the direct expense of their own needs or their partner's comfort. The real tragedy here is that the exact same survival skills that kept the peace all those years ago are now actively sabotaging adult romantic relationships today. Think about it. As a child, self-worth was based entirely on not causing trouble. But to be an effective adult partner, self-worth has to be built on open communication. It's built on discussing what we want together as a team. You simply cannot build a thriving adult partnership if your primary operating system is still programmed to avoid upsetting your parents at all costs. All right, let's get to the solutions in Section 4, the cure, establishing healthy boundaries. So how do we actually solve this mystery? How do we break this stressful cycle without, completely destroying the family? Because remember, this isn't about hating your parents. It's about untangling that enmeshment. Our source material offers a highly practical 3-step psychological roadmap for reclaiming your adult identity. And the best part? These are all internal shifts you can make without having to stage some massive, dramatic confrontation with your parents. Let's break down exactly how you can execute these 3 steps to protect your peace. Step 1 requires you to kind of play detective with your own mind. You have to look past the surface-level anger. The next time you feel that sullen teenager mood creeping in, try to identify the exact trigger. Was it a comment about your schedule, the way your mom looked at your partner? Once you pinpoint the trigger, look for the hidden emotion beneath it. It's almost always the shame of regression, the guilt of choosing your partner, or maybe just the painful, unfulfilled wish to be recognized as an adult. Just recognizing this immediately helps diffuse the anger. Next, you have to actively shift your psychological home base. By making small, independent choices, like deciding exactly what time you're going to leave or choosing what you're going to eat, you slowly remind your brain that you are an autonomous adult. You're signaling to yourself that your true home is no longer the physical house you grew up in. Your true home is now the life and the foundation you're building with your partner. You don't have to announce this to your parents, by the way. You just have to believe it yourself. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, genuinely empowering thought. Loving your family and living as an independent adult absolutely do not have to be at war with each other. You can love your mother without living by her expectations. So what small choice, what gentle boundary will you set today to reclaim your adult self the very next time you walk through that front door? Think about it and take back your power. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.